there, welcome to the Healing Migraines Naturally podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Caesar, and I am a licensed naturopathic doctor, former chronic migraine sufferer, and I've dedicated my life to helping other women with chronic migraines rediscover a migraine-free life. So welcome to the podcast today. Someone sent me a Facebook reel from the medical medium and asked me to respond, and so I'm kind of known for loving to get on my soapbox, and so this is going to be one of those soapbox moments for me, so bear with me here. And I do want to say that I am not recording this. I'm not trying to do a gotcha on the medical medium. I'm not trying to own him. I'm not trying to be overly critical, but, you know, I'm very passionate about helping chronic migraine sufferers because I used to be one. And if you're listening to the podcast, you're probably right in that same boat. And one thing that I'm particularly passionate about is because migraines are such a common disorder. Worldwide, it's actually one of the most common disabling conditions that people suffer from. Migraines have been documented even in the ancient Greek literature from the ancient Greek physicians. Migraines were documented. They've been plaguing humans since the dawn of time. And so because they are so common and so many people suffer from them, a lot of people may only have a couple migraines a year. Other people are having daily migraines, right? So, there's a wide range of suffering with migraines, but they are extremely common. And so unfortunately, this generates a tremendous market, okay? And so migraine sufferers are one of the largest markets to market to if you have a healthcare product. So, I can't go on Facebook without seeing an advertisement for, a migraine hat, migraine supplements, migraine, do-it-yourself recovery program, all of these things. And the reason for that is because there are so many people that suffer from migraines that it's a tremendous market. And our mind is always looking for sort of like the one thing that'll fix it, like what's the one thing I could do to make this go away? Our mind operates like that. And so it's this special magnesium, it's this special, thing you strap on your forehead, right? It just lends itself to that. And so migraine sufferers in particular, because they're marketed to so much with these sort of little quick fix type things. Oh, this is the magic bullet type thing that you can buy from me. Migraine sufferers have tried all of these things. Migraine sufferers are very, very jaded around solutions because they've tried so many things and they've been burned so many times by these sort of, little magic bullet supplements or appliances or all of these little gadgets and tricks. And it really, unfortunately, if you get too jaded, if you're burned too many times, it becomes a barrier to actually healing and recovering and finding the actual solution. So I'm really passionate about this. I can't read the medical medium's mind. Maybe he thinks he can read mine, but I can't read his mind. I don't know what's truly motivating him. I like to think that most people that are in sort of the healthcare space or the alternative medicine space, most of those people are doing it because they have a genuine desire to help people. So I'll give medical medium the benefit of the doubt on that. But I want to kind of walk through what he's saying here and point out some things, and I think it'll be helpful for you because you're also trying to evaluate, right, like who has a solution, who's on the right track, right? And so I kind of want to take this and just point out some things, when you're getting the same Facebook ads that I'm getting or the same kind of marketing, you can turn sort of a critical eye to the marketing, to the reel, to the person, and kind of do that evaluation for yourself. Hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month. And as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes. And on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. Okay, so let's dive in here. I'm going to share the screen of the reel. We're going to take a look at the reel together. So just a second.
There's a lot of things that trigger migraines. They're not the direct cause, but they trigger the migraine. Dehydration is one of them.
Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about here is he's using this word trigger. Okay, so amongst migraine sufferers, this is a word that we use, right? In fact, our neurologist has told us to track our triggers, right? The way that he's using trigger here, I want to have you take a listen to here, okay? I'm going to start it over again.
But they trigger the migraine. Dehydration is one of them. A lot of people have electrolyte deficiencies. Not enough electrolytes floating around.
So he's saying, okay, there are a lot of things that trigger migraines. They're not the direct cause of the migraine, but they're triggering the migraine. So when I listen to him talk about this, there seems to be some confusion around the usage of the word trigger. Okay, so, amongst migraine sufferers, how are we using the word trigger? We're using the word trigger for sort of acute things that are happening that are tipping us over into the migraine. So, when your neurologist says, I want you to track your triggers, right? In that usage, the neurologist is saying, okay, when you get a migraine, think back as to what might have caused this, what might have been unusual, what might have stood out that was some sort of unusual or stressful incident that occurred. And many times people will be given lists of common so-called triggers. A lot of them are so-called food triggers, right? So the chocolate, the tomatoes, the garlic and onions, okay? So it's this concept that there is like an exposure to something in the environment. There's a stressor coming in, sunlight, the weather, the wind, or something that we call stress, like a conflict or an argument with someone, right? Something that's sort of coming in, kind of hitting us from the outside that's quote unquote triggering the migraine, okay? Many times, actually, many neurologists will talk about triggers as if the trigger is causing the migraine, right? Like you ate the chocolate. Why'd you eat the chocolate? You gave yourself a migraine with the chocolate, right? So just the way that he's kind of talking about this here, it signals to me that he's not really well versed in the language, kind of the usage of the word trigger amongst migraine sufferers. What triggers actually are stressors. They're physical stressors or mental and emotional stressors that kind of tip us into the migraine state, okay? Now, when you have a stressor kind of pushing you out of balance, okay, out of a state of health, pushing you into a migraine, what no one talks about is the counterforce of our own resiliency and vitality that pushes against the stressor and keeps us in balance, keeps us in homeostasis, keeps us in a state of health. When we're in a state of homeostasis, a state of health, we don't get the migraine, okay? So when the physical stressor of the barometric pressure change that's accompanying the thunderstorm pushes against us, we want to counter that push with our own resiliency and vitality so that we can stay upright, we can stay in homeostasis and balance in a state of health so that we don't get the migraine in the first place. And that is what is not understood by your neurologist and by most people in sort of the alternative medicine space or the natural medicine space. that are trying to help migraine sufferers. Everybody's talking about triggers, but they're not talking about the flip side of that. Yes, the trigger is a stressor that's coming in and knocking us out of balance and tipping us into a migraine, but the flip side of that is our own resiliency and vitality that counters that stress and keeps us out of our migraine zone, okay? Keeps us upright. I've talked about this a lot on the podcast. We'll link to some pertinent episodes in the description, but this is really critical. And so, he's not talking about that in this Facebook reel, right? He's just talking about triggers. This is a critical piece. And this is, if you really start thinking about your experience of tracking your triggers, you'll start to see, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I track my triggers. I ate the chocolate on Monday. Didn't get a migraine. Ate the chocolate on Wednesday. I got a migraine. Well, okay, is it the chocolate or is it not, right? Then on Friday I had the chocolate. I got a headache, right? Chocolate, okay, there's nothing wrong with chocolate. Chocolate is a very nutrient-dense food item, okay? Now, we may put a lot of sugar in there and like some other things in there that maybe aren't as health supporting, but chocolate itself is extraordinarily nutrient dense. And when you eat chocolate, you have to have good digestive function to break that very nutrient dense food down. So when you're eating chocolate, when you eat any kind of food that's very nutrient dense, you are putting a stress on your digestive tract. Your digestive tract has to be functioning well enough. It's got to be strong enough. It's got to be robust enough to break down nutrient dense food. So when you look at migraine food trigger lists, you'll notice that most of those foods are very nutrient dense foods. And so when you eat something that's very nutrient dense, you're going to put some stress on your digestive tract. If I lift 1 pound or I lift 10 pounds, I'm going to be putting more stress on my muscles with that 10-pound weight than with a 1-pound weight. If I'm eating more nutrient dense food, I'm going to put more stress on my digestive tract. And if my digestive tract is not up for that challenge, that's going to put systemic stress on my body, and I have to have enough resiliency and vitality to weather that stress. Okay, so when you start to track triggers, you start to notice they're not very consistent, right? Some people, yes, every time they eat the chocolate, every single time they get a blinding migraine. But that's not that common, okay? For most people, they can eat the chocolate one day, they can't eat the chocolate the next day. What do I do? Is it a trigger or is it not? Is it causing my migraines? What's going on here? It's not so simple as this is a migraine trigger and this is causing your migraines. It's a much more complex interaction that's going on within our body. Let's go back to medical medium here, okay? And I'm going to back it up a little bit again. So he's saying dehydration is a migraine trigger, okay? So I've talked about water consumption on other podcasts. Okay. We are living in a cultural moment where we are now being told to drink a gallon of water per day. I mean, I've gone into Target and I've passed by the little end cap display of water bottles, and now we have gallon water jugs for sale with like timestamps on the side, 9 a.m., noon, 3 p.m., 9 p.m., right? So I'm supposed to drink this water by this period of time so that I can drink a whole gallon of water per day. Never in human history have we had this ability to drink a gallon of water per day. Okay, now again, I'm not saying that nobody was sick hundreds of years ago, but you can start to see the silliness of it now. I've talked about on the podcast before, a few years back, I dug into where did this standard recommendation that everyone needs to drink 64 ounces of water every day. Everybody just takes this for granted. I was taught this when I went to naturopathic medical school. I didn't question it, right? But I had to start questioning it a few years back because it's gotten so silly, right? And so I dug into it. I talked about this in more detail in another podcast, but I dug into it and there's absolutely no evidence. Basically, this was just a made-up recommendation, and now we're way past even 64 ounces of water per day. When our body is functioning properly, we should be able to regulate our fluid balance within the body. We are designed to be able to survive through periods of time where water might be scarce, okay? And in fact, our internal biochemistry, when our cells are doing their work, different metabolic processes, water is actually produced inside of the cell, okay? So, certain metabolic processes actually make H2O inside of our body, okay? If you are in the habit of drinking 64 ounces of water every day. Your body is going to acclimate to that quantity of water. Your kidneys, the main organ that's regulating your fluid balance, is monitoring, okay, what's the concentration in the bloodstream to water, to nutrients, particularly minerals, okay? And if that starts to get out of balance, if I start to have more water than minerals, I need to get rid of some of this water because I need to maintain a certain concentration of minerals. So when that proportion starts to get unbalanced, the kidneys will remove water from the bloodstream and put it into the bladder. We urinate that out, okay? Your kidneys become acclimated to routine conditions. And so if you consistently drink 64 ounces of water per day, if you consistently drink a gallon of water per day, your kidneys are going to say, okay, I know she's going to give me 64 ounces of water, so I'm going to operate in this way to keep everything in balance. If you suddenly discontinue that, right? Suddenly you just drink, 8 ounces of water in one day, that's going to put a stress on your kidneys. Any change from the routine generates a stressor on the body. Because our body is trying to anticipate what it needs to do. The most obvious example of that is within our digestive tract, right? If we eat lunch every day around noon, well, around 11:30, the digestive tract says, hey, she's going to put stuff in here in about 30 minutes. I'm going to start making hydrochloric acid. I'm going to start making enzymes. I'm going to start to get moving here, right? And so the digestive tract starts to prepare for the routine meal that it's anticipating. So your kidneys are going to start to prepare or anticipate a particular intake of water every day, and then it's going to adjust things accordingly. So if I abruptly discontinue this, okay, so I'm going to give you an example. When I fly, I would prefer not to have to use the restroom on the airplane. Particularly if I'm flying, on a more than 3-hour flight, I really don't want to have to go to the bathroom. And so what I do on days that I'm flying is I don't drink any water. We'll just have the typical water that I have with my breakfast, which is not a tremendous amount. You will not see me in line at the airport buying a water bottle and taking it on the plane because I don't want to have to use the restroom while I'm on the plane, okay? So I don't drink any water until I get to my destination. Normally, on a normal day, I drink anywhere from 32 to 42 ounces. That's what's typical for me. So this is a pretty drastic reduction, okay? Not as drastic of a reduction as if I were drinking a gallon of water every day, but it's a pretty good change in my routine. And so my kidneys are going to have to adapt to that. They're going to have to change how they're operating on the day of that flight. That change in my routine generates a stressor on my body. That stress is going to push me out of homeostasis. That stress is going to tip me into my migraine zone. If I have enough resiliency and vitality, I can keep myself in balance, in homeostasis, out of my migraine zone. And right now, that's exactly what happens to me. I know that right now, where I am right now in my life, I have enough resiliency and vitality that I can weather the stress of not consuming the regular amount of water that I typically do for a day so that I don't have to use the airplane bathroom. Hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client, Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month. And as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes. And on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. There was a time in my life where I did not have enough resiliency and vitality to weather that type of stressor, that change in what my body was accustomed to. There was a time where I wouldn't have been able to weather that. And so in that time in my life, I drank water, right? During the flight, like you're told to do, right? You're always told, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate while you're flying. And there have been times in my life where I definitely did that because I knew that if I didn't, that abrupt change in my water intake and the stress that would inevitably produce on my body, I didn't have enough resiliency and vitality to counter that, okay? So is it the water intake? Is it dehydration, right? If my kidneys are functioning properly and I can weather the stress of not putting in the exact amount of water that it's accustomed to, my kidneys are not going to put me in a dehydrated state, okay? My kidneys are going to manage what they're doing and they're going to manage the fluid level, the water level in my blood. And I'm not going to get dehydrated in a day of airline travel. If my kidneys are struggling to function properly, and I don't mean, you do lab work for your kidneys and it comes back. I mean subtle stuff, okay, that's not going to be picked up on blood work. But if my kidneys are kind of struggling to maintain that fluid balance, right, well, now I could have problems. And there's inherently a stressor that I'm putting on my body when I do this because I'm not doing my normal routine that my body is acclimated to. So I have to have that resiliency and vitality component to this. He's talking about dehydration. Migraine sufferers, right, they're afraid to leave the house without water, right? Because this has been drilled into everybody. You could be getting migraines because you're dehydrated, you're not drinking enough water. And so, I've had clients where they're lugging around that gallon water bottle now from Target. They're stressed, they're worried that what if I don't drink all of this? Oh my goodness, having to go to the bathroom all the time, right? If I've got to drink a gallon of water every day, how do I go to Target without having to use the bathroom, let alone take a 4-hour flight without having to use the bathroom, right? So, all of this, it's not necessary, okay? We don't need that much water. If your kidneys are functioning properly, you're not getting dehydrated. Now, that is not to say, right, if you're listening to this podcast and you're struggling with migraines, right, your resiliency and vitality might be low, right? And so any little change to your routine, right, whether it be your drinking habits, how much water you're routinely drinking, the time of night that you go to bed routinely, the time of day that you get up routinely, the timing of your meals that your body is expecting, right? The routine of your meal times, right? Any of those routines, if you disrupt those routines, you're going to generate a stressor on your body. You have to have enough resiliency and vitality to counter that stressor. And so if you're suffering with chronic migraines, you're feeling that every time, right? I can't go to bed too late. I can't get up too early. I can't miss a meal. I got to drink all my water. It's not an indicator that there's something about your brain that just requires this sort of strict lifestyle. It's the inherent relationship between routines or habits and how the body becomes acclimated to those and adjusts its normal functioning to those routines and habits, and the inevitable stress that disrupting that routine or habit is going to create on the body, and then our resiliency and vitality that has to come in and sort of keep us upright in the face of that stress. Okay, so again, it's not so simple as, sleep, that's a trigger. It's more complicated than that, okay? I just want to point this out, right, because he's kind of throwing around this word trigger. I think the way he uses it, it just doesn't ring true to me that he really understands the trigger, the meaning of the word trigger within migraine sufferers. And then, again, if I have to watch another TikTok video or Facebook reel on dehydration and migraines, right? It's like, come on, people. We've got to think about this a little bit more critically. We're now to the point of drinking a gallon of water a day. I mean, this is not it.
Is one of them. A lot of people have electrolyte deficiencies, not enough electrolytes floating around the bloodstream.
Okay. So then he says, people don't have enough electrolytes. Now, I told you this was going to be a big soapbox one. So what do we mean by electrolytes? Okay. From a medical perspective, there are only 3 electrolytes. It's potassium, sodium, and chloride. When you get standard blood work, when you get blood work that is routine blood work that you would get every year from your doctor, there's a panel called a comprehensive metabolic panel. 3 of those tests on a comprehensive metabolic panel, or it's called a CMP, they're measuring your electrolytes, your sodium, potassium, and your chloride, okay? Proper electrolyte balance in the bloodstream is critical, okay? If your sodium or your potassium or your chloride goes too high or too low, you could die pretty quickly, okay? That's why they're measuring it on standard labs. I won't go into tremendous detail on this, but, if you can't maintain your sodium and your potassium and your chloride level in your blood, you've got major organ problems, okay? So that's what that blood work is screening for. Do I have major organ problems? But people throw the word electrolytes around when they just mean minerals, okay? So then there are a lot of other minerals that the body needs and uses. But there are pumps called sodium potassium pumps in the cell wall of our cells, and that's a major transporter to get things in and out of the cell. There's a tremendous need in the body at the cellular level for sodium and potassium, also for chloride, but also for other minerals too. So when he says electrolytes, right, are we talking about the 3 electrolytes from a medical perspective, or are we just talking about minerals? Like, what are we talking about here? So then he says some people are deficient in electrolytes and they don't have enough floating around in the bloodstream. Well, I talk about the need, right, to get the nutrients that our cells need to our cells. In fact, I call this the first principle, or the first thing we need for our body to restore itself to health or maintain its health. Our cells need nutrients to function properly, and so we have to get those nutrients to the cells. Now, it's not just electrolytes, sodium, potassium, and chloride. It's not just minerals. It's a whole host of nutrients that are required for your cells to function properly. So yeah, a lot of people do have not only nutritional deficiencies, but a lot of people have difficulty actually delivering and getting the nutrients to the cells. This is what I talk about extensively on the podcast, right? People are just kind of throwing this out there that, you've got these nutrient deficiencies, you got electrolyte deficiencies. How'd that happen, right? Especially for migraine sufferers, they're told all the time, electrolytes, electrolytes, electrolytes. They're drinking Gatorade, they're drinking Propel, they're drinking liquid IV, right? They're doing all this stuff for electrolytes. Why are we so deficient in electrolytes, right? Are we not eating food? Are we not digesting our food and getting those nutrients or minerals out of the food? This is where we need to look a little bit deeper. We should have enough of an appetite where we feel like eating enough food that has enough nutrient content and variety. And then when we eat that food, our digestive tract has to be able to break the food down. Our digestive tract has to be functioning robustly enough to digest the food, get the nutrients out of the food. Then we've got to get those nutrients into the bloodstream and actually transport it to the cells. Things are not randomly just floating around in the blood and somehow getting to places, okay? Our blood is actually a very complex organ, and sometimes people's blood as an organ is sluggish to do that delivery, okay? So again, he's just sort of saying like, oh, well, you could be deficient in electrolytes and they're not getting to your brain, okay? Well, again, migraines, we keep focusing on the brain with migraines. We do that because for most people, it's their brain that hurts, right? The pain is in the head. And then there are frequently other neurological symptoms that accompany migraines. The whole body is affected by migraines, right? This is why they used to be called sick headaches. We feel sick. This is why they call them sick headaches, because you're in bed, right? You're foggy. You can't talk. You can't open your eyes. You can hardly move. You just want to go to bed. It's like you're sick. Okay, so it's not just a problem in the brain. Okay, it's a whole body phenomenon. If you've been following the podcast, I hope that you're starting to understand that this is a lot bigger than just your brain. Okay.
To get to the brain, deficiencies, not enough electrolytes floating around the bloodstream to get to the brain.
Yeah, so, it's not just your brain that uses electrolytes or minerals. Every cell in your body requires electrolytes or minerals, other nutrients. And then I don't really understand what he's saying here. He's saying, it's not enough of a electrical strength that you should be getting from the electrolytes. That just doesn't make sense to me. Okay, electrolytes, right? There's the name electro in them, so maybe he's thinking that there's like there's electricity and something like that. I'm just not quite following him on the way that he's putting that. Every cell in your body requires sodium and potassium, chloride, other minerals, other nutrients to function optimally.
So the electrolytes aren't strong enough or enough of them, ample amounts, to actually fulfill what your brain needs, which is that neurotransmitter electrical impulse strength from electrolytes.
Okay, so yeah, you really want to get me on a rant. Okay, do we have to talk about B12 anymore? Do we have to talk about B vitamins anymore? Okay, again, should be getting nutrients from our food. We make certain nutrients. If we are unable to make the nutrients that we need, why aren't we, cofactors, or you might call them, precursor nutrients that we need to make certain nutrients, right? It's like, for some unknown reason, I don't have enough B12, okay? We could be eating something with a high quantity of naturally occurring B12 in the food, but if our stomach is not producing something called intrinsic factor, we're not going to absorb the B12, right? We got to go back to, okay, am I eating food? Do I have a robust appetite where I actually feel like eating food? Is my digestion functioning properly so that I can absorb the nutrients out of the food? Different types of nutrients within the food require certain conditions or cofactors, enzymes, certain bacteria, right, in order for proper absorption. Okay, so again, we're always sort of treating this like, oh, somehow something's deficient. Well, who knows why? Let's just, take a pill for it. Let's take a B12 shot or a capsule or something like that. If you're really going to look at root causes, you have to follow the physiology and biochemistry of the body, which is pretty well documented. I mean, we have discoveries yet to be made, but over here are my bookshelves. I have a whole bunch of biochemistry and physiology textbooks that document all of this. Okay, so there's stuff we know for fact that's pretty well established on how the body works. Okay, so when you know that, if you know that you need intrinsic factor produced by your stomach in order to absorb B12, efficiently, and somebody says I have a B12 issue, well, you start to think about, okay, is digestion working well, right? You're not just going to think, oh, well, we better do a B12 supplement.
Whether or not there's enough B12 on your blood tests or not, people have deficiencies in the nervous system, B12 deficiency in the central nervous system. So that alone can be a trigger, right?
So, again, he is correct. Nutrient testing, there's a difference between the amount of nutrients that are in your bloodstream versus the nutrients that are within the cell, at the cell wall, okay? And so nutrient testing is an area that is not very reliable, unfortunately. So, particularly, let's go back to sodium and potassium and chloride, the three electrolytes that are routinely measured when people go in for their yearly blood work. The body is going to keep the level of sodium and potassium and chloride within the appropriate range in your bloodstream, because if it doesn't, you die pretty quickly. Okay, so there's a difference between those minerals in your blood. Your body is going to say, you know what, I'm going to take this out of the cellular area. I'm going to take this out of her bones because I got to maintain the blood level of this particular mineral, because otherwise I'm going to die. Okay, so like I've talked about before, our body is always trying to do the best it can in the conditions that it finds itself in. Okay, so if our sodium level in our blood is going to tank, our body is going to do whatever it takes to keep that sodium level in the blood where it needs to be at the expense of the cellular level. For these reasons, it's difficult sometimes to measure certain nutrients or certain minerals with a blood test. There are some specialty tests that claim to measure these things, but I am a little skeptical on the reliability. I don't think that has been perfected yet. So he's correct that, your B12 level in your blood might be showing up normal, but, within the cell or at a certain moment in time where a cellular process needs to take place and it needs B12 to do it, there might be a deficiency at that moment.
In the central nervous system.
But here again, he keeps focusing on the central nervous system. And, just because your head hurts, right, doesn't mean that all of the focus goes to what's happening in your brain, okay? Migraines are really a whole body phenomenon. And he keeps focusing on your brain, your nervous system, things like that. And so I think, again, it's just signaling to me that he doesn't have that much familiarity with migraines in particular.
That alone can be a trigger, right? Stress is another trigger, which is adrenal. So the whole thing with adrenals, which is really important to know, and I'm grabbing my adrenals right here, is that with adrenals is we walk around on adrenaline all day because many of us do things that actually prompt adrenaline release. It's not.
Okay. So now we're moving to the adrenals. Okay. So within the natural medicine space, a lot of natural practitioners, everything's blamed on the adrenals. Okay. He's talking about adrenaline. Okay. So most people recognize adrenaline. That's a stress hormone. There's another stress hormone that most people are aware of called cortisol. In most situations, you're going to have both of those hormones released at the same time. So if there's a reason to have adrenaline released, usually we're going to have some cortisol released at the same time. He's saying we are doing things all the time. We're walking around on adrenaline. We're doing things all the time that stimulate an adrenaline release. Well, yeah, adrenaline is a necessary hormone. Okay, so also cortisol. So a lot of people are sort of, they act like adrenaline and cortisol are like bad. So yes, we do things all the time that require adrenaline to be released or cortisol to be released, such as standing up. Okay, so when you are sitting down and then you stand up, you are moving against gravity. And so gravity is pulling the blood out of your head towards your feet. And so when you stand up, your adrenal glands give a little puff of cortisol and adrenaline to activate your cardiovascular system, get your heart pumping with a little bit more force, and to constrict your arteries a little bit, to increase the blood pressure a little bit in the circulatory system, so that you maintain the blood flow, you maintain the amount of blood in your head. Okay, so this isn't a bad thing. This is normal. This is what should be happening. In fact, many people, because their adrenals are lacking the nutrients that they need to produce these hormones, there's an overload of metabolic waste material that has accumulated because every time the adrenals make these hormones, they're making waste material. And then there's a lack of cellular voltage or cellular vitality to run the biochemical reactions within the cell. Most people are having difficulty making the adrenaline and cortisol, and that's why when they stand up, they're feeling dizzy, the room's going dark, right? They got to pause for a minute. And so that's actually much more common, right? He's kind of describing like we're walking around on adrenaline all day. Well, to some extent, we need to be. You're not going to be able to stand up and walk around if you don't have that little puff of adrenaline to help keep the blood in your brain. Okay. Hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client, Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month. And as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes. And on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now.
Not just about hardships and tough times and stress all day long. It's also things like not eating enough at the right times, and then we're releasing adrenaline all day.
Okay. So when he's talking about not eating enough and not eating at the right time, I assume what he's describing is someone experiencing a drop in their blood sugar. Okay. So if we eat in such a way that we spike and then drop our blood sugar, that's a great way to have a low blood sugar episode. Missing a meal, again, if we become acclimated, we get in the routine of eating at a certain time, and then our body anticipates, okay, yeah, I'm going to get some food here, I'm going to get some glucose from the food, I'm anticipating all of that, and then that doesn't happen. That generates a stressor on the body. Eventually, if we don't eat, our blood sugar is going to drop. Okay, so when the blood sugar drops, this is actually, the body treats a low blood sugar episode as a major emergency. Our brain runs on glucose, and so if there isn't enough glucose for our brain to function, we're going to pass out. We're going to go unconscious. So as the blood sugar starts to drop, the body jumps in because it doesn't want us to pass out. Okay, it treats it as the sort of potential emergency situation that it could develop into, and so it releases adrenaline and cortisol from the adrenal glands in addition to some other hormones. But the adrenaline and the cortisol stimulate the liver to produce glucose, so we can produce our own glucose if we need to, and the adrenaline and the cortisol help signal the liver to do that. And so that helps prevent the blood sugar from dropping. But all of that whole reaction from missing a meal, going outside of our routine, to just the stress of the low blood sugar episode itself, that generates a stressor on the body, and we have to have enough resiliency and vitality to counter that stress. And this is one of the reasons why amongst migraine sufferers, missing a meal, right, notorious for quote unquote causing a migraine or triggering a migraine. So when he's talking about this, I'm assuming he's talking about a low blood sugar episode. He's saying that we're, kind of just releasing adrenaline all day long if we don't eat the right things or eat at the right times. You're going to have that burst of adrenaline when the blood sugar drops. When all of this whole hormonal cascade kicks off due to a low blood sugar episode, the individual is going to be driven to eat. Okay. And so this is where when people are going through a low blood sugar episode, they're like, I got to eat something. Where are the chips? Where are the pretzels? Where's the candy? Snickers bar, you're driven to eat. You can't control it because your body is like, okay, we don't want to pass out here. Get some glucose in here. Glucose, get her to eat. So we're driven to eat something. Unfortunately, we can eat something in response. It's going to, again, spike and drop our blood sugar, and then we repeat the cycle all over. But for him to say we're like walking around, like we're just releasing adrenaline all day, it's a little bit of a little bit of an overstatement. I don't really know where he's coming from with that. And again, it's sort of painting this very necessary hormone that we need to be able to walk around, in addition to many other things. It's kind of painting it as a bad guy, and that's what's happened with cortisol and adrenaline, both of these so-called stress hormones. It's normal to be in a situation or require little bursts of cortisol and adrenaline throughout the day. That's normal, okay? And in fact, what's actually plaguing people more often than not is that they're not able to produce the necessary adrenaline and cortisol that they need to make it through the day. I don't like it when we're casting something like these hormones as like the bad guys or something like that. I don't think that's helpful for people. Migraine sufferers, right? It's nearly universal that chronic migraine sufferers now have anxiety about when is the next migraine attack going to come? What is the next thing that's going to trigger a migraine for me? What do I need to avoid? What am I doing wrong? Right? All of these things. And then we're painting hormones that need to be there within our body as sort of the problem. now I've got one more thing to worry about. Where's my adrenaline and cortisol, right? We want to get people out of this hypervigilant, semi-paranoid state. In fact, when I work with my clients, this is usually something that we have to consciously work on. I've been there too. It would be kind of unusual if at any moment you could wake up feeling great and by 4 p.m. be laying in bed with a trash can by your side because you're so nauseous you're afraid you're going to vomit and you totally can't function. It's pretty normal when people go through that enough times that they start to develop some anxiety and almost paranoia around this. And so we're never going to feel good if we're continuing to live in this anxious, hypervigilant, paranoid state. So I don't like to contribute to that with this type of language, like your naturally occurring hormones are the bad guy and causing you problems.
And that eventually causes a problem because the brain fills up with that adrenaline. So one of the things that triggers off that adrenaline is...
So your brain doesn't fill up with adrenaline. I don't know where he's getting this. I can't explain that statement.
Things that triggers off that adrenaline is the caffeine. That triggers adrenaline release all day long. So we got the coffee everybody's drinking, cappuccinos everybody's drinking, got the espressos, we eat the chocolate, we do the tea, we do the matcha tea. And when we're doing those, we're taking adrenaline off every day. And that adrenaline is toxic. It eventually dehydrates us.
Okay. So now we're on to caffeine and the evils of caffeine. Okay, so many migraine sufferers have been told by their neurologist that they have to stop consuming caffeine, whether it's in coffee, chocolate, these types of things. Many people in the natural medicine space have written books that you can't have any caffeine, you can't have any coffee if you have migraines. What I have found in my work, so when I first started working exclusively with women with migraines in 2017, I also followed this advice, okay? Because definitely, like as part of my naturopathic medical education, some warnings about caffeine were definitely there. So I had all of my clients wean off of caffeine. I said wean off of, okay? If you want to have a great migraine, cold turkey withdrawal from caffeine. Do not do it, okay? So I would carefully wean my clients off of caffeine. Then when they were feeling better, if they wanted to consume, if they were coffee drinkers, they like to have coffee. Once they were feeling better, reintroduce caffeine at a moderate amount. Okay, that's what I did with every new client. But as I'm oriented to do, I'm always like questioning, like, is this actually necessary? How do we get the best results with the least unnecessary things, effort, disruptions, etc. So I started questioning this because I am a coffee drinker. I love coffee. I have coffee every day. And so I wanted to really make sure, okay, do we really have to do this? Because I know if you're a coffee drinker or, you're a tea drinker, you want to have your coffee. You don't want to have to unnecessarily wean off of this if you don't have to. So I tested it out and I started looking at, okay, do we really have to get people off of caffeine if they do consume it? And we don't. You can overconsume caffeine. Okay, caffeine is a pretty toxic molecule. You can kill yourself if you consume too much caffeine. It takes a lot of work and a lot of resources for your liver to detoxify the caffeine molecule and get it out of your body. And you can see that because it takes a while to do it. And if you overconsume it, you can kill yourself, okay? Because it doesn't get out of your body very quickly. And so you can overconsume it and it eventually can become toxic and you can kill yourself. And so when I have clients that consume coffee or caffeinated drinks, I do look at, okay, is this too much? Okay, you can overconsume caffeine, but if people are drinking a reasonable amount of caffeine or reasonable amount of coffee, what I have found is for most people they can continue to drink that and they can still feel better and recover from their migraines. He's saying that the caffeine stimulates adrenaline. It does. It stimulates adrenaline and cortisol. Caffeine, there's always these caffeine wars, right? There's the study that says the caffeine is killing you, and then 6 months later, a study comes out that the caffeine is actually preventing Alzheimer's, and all of these things, right? The coffee bean, right? It's a plant. There's a lot of nutrients in it, okay? So when you're drinking coffee, you're actually drinking a very nutrient-dense beverage that also contains caffeine. Okay, is it stimulating some adrenaline and cortisol? If you have the nutrients that your adrenals need to make that adrenaline and cortisol. You can clear out the metabolic waste material that's generated when you make the cortisol and adrenaline, and you have enough cellular voltage to run those biochemical pathways. And then your liver has the capacity, it's got the room, it's got the margin to clear out the caffeine from your system. You will be okay. I know this from my own personal experience. You will be okay. Okay, so again, is it the caffeine that's causing the problem? Is it the adrenaline and the cortisol that's causing the problem? Or are there actually some deeper factors at play here within our body and within our biochemistry? He's kind of hitting like all of the hot button targets for migraine sufferers. We've got dehydration, we've got B vitamins, we've got caffeine, okay, we've got cortisol and adrenaline, right? He's kind of like checking all of these standard boxes that we hear all the time when it comes to migraines. The migraines are still there, right? More and more people are suffering from migraines despite all of this talk about these common topics.
It eventually goes in here and starts to burn out neurotransmitters, and that's a great trigger right there. That's why when someone is under stress, for example, and they trigger off an adrenaline rush because they just had a breakup, a relationship, a betrayal, a hardship, an argument, somebody, a confrontation, all of a sudden they get a migraine later. It triggers off their migraine. Another reason for migraine.
So yes, mental and emotional stressors. Okay, so mental and emotional stressors are also pushing the body out of balance. They can push us into our migraine zone. Is that only because of adrenaline and cortisol release in response to mental emotional stressors? I don't believe that for one moment. So we are more than just a physical body. There's a mental and emotional component to us humans too. We really don't have a good understanding of the totality of the human being, right? Because we are more than just a bag of biochemistry walking around. It's funny, he's like the medical medium. He's somebody that kind of made his name known because he was consulting with a spirit in the non-physical realm, but everything that he's talking about, like he's now couching mental and emotional stressors like, conflicts with people, heartbreaks, etc. From a purely physical standpoint, I find that a little ironic, okay? There's a definite physical component to mental and emotional stressors, right? There's a connection between what we call our mental and emotional aspect in our physical body that we don't have a very good understanding of. When we are prone to migraines, vast majority of migraine sufferers will experience a migraine after these types of stressful events that he's describing, right? And so I do work with my clients quite a bit. This is very individualized and personalized work, but it's not just related to adrenaline and cortisol coming from your adrenals. It's not just related to our biochemistry. So, like I say, I find it a little ironic that the medical medium is just tying everything to adrenaline. He's hardly mentioning cortisol. I'm just mentioning it because those two go hand in hand, but he keeps harping on this adrenaline connection, even though he's supposedly consulting the spirit realm for his information.
Migraines is like allergies, but not necessarily allergies. When the pollen count is high or pollution is high, that can trigger somebody into a migraine. It's not.
Okay, so now we're hitting, right, because a lot of migraine sufferers, they will first be diagnosed with like chronic sinus infections. This is very common amongst migraine sufferers because many migraines, the symptoms of the migraine are in the sinus area. The pain is in the sinus area. It's also very common for migraine sufferers to have nasal congestion, runny nose, watery eyes. I've talked about this in other podcasts too. So again, he's kind of hitting another hot button. Pollen, air pollution, but he's saying it's not actually the pollen that's the cause.
It's not the pollen that's the cause. It's a trigger because we've got sensitivities in the sinuses. So in the sinus cavities, because the sinus cavities are inflamed. They're inflamed from bugs like streptococcus. A lot of people have chronic sinusitis. It's always there.
Okay, so he's talking about sinus inflammation. Done some episodes on this too, where I really talk about what's really going on here. Now he's blaming bacteria. Okay, so we are covered with bacteria. That's normal. You have naturally occurring bacteria in your sinuses, in your nose. Okay, this is all normal. if our immune system is functioning properly, we keep that normal bacteria in check so that it doesn't overgrow. Okay, so again, it's like, oh, okay, now I've got bacteria. Now I got bacteria. I got to get rid of the bacteria. We got to think about these things a little bit deeper. We got to use a little bit more common sense when we're talking about things like this. Okay, everything is covered with bacteria and viruses and mold, and I mean, we're designed to withstand all of that. Okay, so again, he's just kind of like almost running down like the standard checklist of topics for migraine sufferers, but we're really not looking at it from any sort of like complexity or even like common sense attitude.
They have underlying streptococcus issues. So when all of a sudden the air's not right outside or the pollen count is high, they get triggered into a migraine. There's so many more. We'll cover them.
Okay. So I talk about this on other podcasts. We'll link to them as to what's going on here. This kind of threw me a little bit that now he's holding like a little plastic model of bacteria here. Okay. So like I say, I cannot read the medical medium's mind. I'd love to give him the benefit of the doubt. But to me, this is somebody that's really not like, to me, it doesn't sound like somebody that's actually ever had a migraine or really understands, helps people with migraines routinely. This seems like someone that's kind of gone through sort of like the standard checklist of this is what we talk about when we talk about migraines. We talk about hydration, we talk about B vitamins, we talk about electrolytes, we talk about, sinus inflammation, it's just sort of like that standard checklist that he's going through. Okay. I hope this helps because I know, right, you're getting these types of reels and TikToks all the time. So start to, ask yourself, okay, is this just another sort of migraine checklist reel that we're going through again? And if I really think about it from a common sense perspective, does it really make sense? Okay, so he keeps saying, these things aren't the cause, but it's like, okay, you are kind of talking about it like these things are the cause. Okay, so I hope this helps give you a little bit of discernment, and I know how frustrating it is for migraine sufferers because we're just inundated with these types of things. Okay. So, I'm doing this, I do my podcast to get information out to migraine sufferers. Of course, if you've been listening to the podcast, you've heard me talk about that I do work one-on-one with women all over the country who have migraines, right? But I'm not kind of promoting, the latest, greatest B12, the latest, greatest magnesium, this electrolyte drink, right, for your brain. That's not going to cut it. And I think most of you listening have realized that because you've tried all of this type of stuff before, right? It seems like he's making these types of videos to try to do more of this sort of like quick fix, now I've got the medical medium, miracle migraine supplement, product line or something like that. I wish it were that simple because migraines are such a horrible, horrible condition. They cause so much suffering. I wish that you could take a particular magnesium blend and solve the problem. That would be wonderful. I would wish for nothing more for that to be the case. Our body is generating migraines because we have pretty serious deficiencies and blockers within what I call the three principles, the three things our body needs to function optimally, to restore itself to health, to maintain its state of health so that we feel good. Migraines are not a symptom phenomenon or cluster of symptoms that the body generates when things are just at the beginning of falling out of balance. Okay, there are other symptoms that I've talked about in other podcast episodes. There are other symptoms that the body generates at first. Okay, you can call them sort of canary in the coal mine symptoms. These are the symptoms that the body starts generating, the beginning indicators, the beginning signs that we're starting to build up blockers or deficiencies within these three areas. By the time you get migraines, you're not, the canary's already dead. Okay, like we've already built up pretty significant blockers and deficiencies and missing pieces within these three principles. So when that happens, you're not going to solve the problem by these sort of, miracle pill, one-off, quick fix, this is, you just need B12. Okay. It's past that point. Okay. We have to go deeper and really take a look at where are the specific blockers and deficiencies, and then how are we going to approach this? Because again, as you know, by the time you have chronic migraines, you're in a hypersensitive state, and any little variance from your routine that your body is acclimated to. So any change that's made, unfortunately, generates such a stress, and our vitality is low that we can't weather any, even, relatively minor change without feeling it. It's highly likely that we're going to get tipped into a migraine. And so migraine sufferers start to feel trapped between a rock and a hard place. I think I need to make some changes. I think if I made some changes, I would feel better, but any little change makes me feel worse and tips me into a migraine. So, this is the state of chronic migraines. It's not a quick fix. It requires a, detailed assessment, careful understanding, and a very gentle approach at the right time, in the right order, because we're so sensitive to any little change. And so when I'm listening to medical medium talk about migraines, right, I'm not hearing that level of understanding. It's just more of like, oh, you just need a couple little things here and you're going to be good to go. I wish that were true, but it's not. So I hope this helps as you're kind of evaluating all of these things that you're getting inundated with, because, like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, they very quickly figure out what we're suffering from. Okay. And then they're giving us these types of like advertisements and stuff like that. That's probably how you found me. Right. So I hope this helps you evaluate things with a little bit more discernment. So thanks so much for joining me today. If you have enjoyed this information, please give us a like, give us a subscribe. It really does help us get the word out. And if you'd like to join my free Facebook group, Healing Migraines Naturally with Leslie Caesar ND, go over and find us on Facebook. We've got over 12,000 women who are interested in rediscovering a migraine-free life. And it's a really, really great Facebook group. A lot of migraine Facebook groups are pretty heavy, and migraines cause a lot of suffering. And so migraine Facebook groups in particular, there's a lot of suffering people in those groups, but I'm very happy that my Facebook group actually has a little bit of a lighter feel than the other migraine Facebook groups out there. So you're welcome to join us. And I get a lot of podcast topics from the questions that people ask in the Facebook group. So go ahead and join us over there if you like to. And I will see you soon. Have a great day, everybody.